My wife, a woman who had insisted on being child-free for 7 years, just told me she wants to have a baby for her ex. Julian's fiancé is infertile, Sarah said, her voice eerily calm. I'm just helping him carry on his family line. You need to be more open-minded about this. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the skull. Seeing the color drain from my face, she added a pathetic kicker. Don't worry, it's just a surrogacy thing. We're keeping it professional. If you go through with this, I roared, my voice cracking, we are done. Divorce Sarah. I slammed the door and stormed out. Walking down the familiar streets of downtown Chicago, my mind drifted back 7 years. Sarah and I weren't just husband and wife. We were college sweethearts. Back then, she was dating Julian Vance. He was her first real love. But then Julian was caught cheating red-handed, and a devastated Sarah ended it. She turned to me, confessing she knew I'd had a crush on her for years. I'll admit, it was love at first sight for me. But I had a code. I didn't move on another man's girl. Once I knew she was taken, I'd buried those feelings deep. That night, she cried in my arms, and a surge of protective instinct took over. I knew she was using me to get back at Julian, but I saw it as my one shot. They say the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else, or at least start a new chapter. Julian was a trust fund playboy, always seen with a different girl on his arm. He didn't deserve her, so I stepped up. I vowed to take care of her. At first, Sarah was distant, always staring at her phone with a haunted look. I knew she couldn't let go of Julian, but I treated her like a queen, putting her on a pedestal and giving her everything. Eventually, I wore her down. She let me in, body and soul. We became a real couple, though every time she saw Julian's name in the news or ran into him at a gala, I saw that flicker of resentment and longing in her eyes. It ate at me. It wasn't until Julian moved out of state after graduation that I finally let my guard down. For 7 years, we were happy, or so I thought. I wanted kids to complete the picture, but Sarah was adamant. She wanted the dink life, double income, no kids. We had long, painful talks about it, but seeing how firm she was, I eventually folded. If it was just us against the world, so be it. Then, 6 months ago, Julian Vance came back to the city, and my world shattered. Ever since Sarah got that first phone call from him, she changed. She started coming home later and later, smelling of a cologne I didn't recognize. A heavy, expensive scent I eventually realized was Julian's favorite brand. On our days off, she used to curl up on the couch with me, binge-watching Netflix and talking about her future. Now, she sat in the corner, staring at her phone like a zombie. She stopped talking to me. She changed her passcode. It used to be her birthday. I had total access. Now, she never let the device out of her sight, even taking it into the shower with her. Our sex life became a chore. There was no passion, no heat. When she reached her peak, she stopped whispering my name. I was terrified that if she opened her mouth, Julian would come out. I suspected she was cheating, but I had no proof. For a while, I considered divorce, but I couldn't throw away 7 years of devotion. I had invested too much. I kept hoping she still loved me, hoping they were just friends. Tired of the uncertainty, I finally hid a GPS tracker in the lining of her handbag. I never expected her to come out today and suggest carrying his child. I looked up at the night sky and laughed at myself. Did I really still need proof? The midnight streets were freezing. After wandering for an hour, I decided to go home for one last stand. I was going to talk to her, really talk. If she was still delusional, then I'd sign the papers. I checked my phone and my heart skipped a beat. Her location was at a 5-star hotel on the Magnificent Mile. It was 11:00 p.m. What business did she have there? The answer was obvious. Julian. Fueled by a mix of desperation and blinding rage, I drove there. Room 591. I pounded on the door. Julian Vance opened it. He was shirtless, a white hotel towel wrapped around his waist. Behind him, Sarah was sprawled on the bed, her silk robe hanging off one shoulder. Her face bore that look of heavy, post-coital exhaustion I knew too well, the way she looked when her bones felt like cotton. My heart felt like it was being shredded by a dull blade. Julian looked surprised, then smug. Mark, look, I can explain. My fist was the only explanation he got. I tackled him, pinning him to the carpet and unloading every ounce of my 7-year resentment into his face. His brow split, blood sprayed from his lip. After 2 solid hooks, his cheek began to balloon. Julian roared, trying to buck me off. I wrapped my hand around his throat, wanting to end the man who had stolen my life. Mark, stop. You're hurting him. Sarah screamed and shoved me with a strength born of panic, not even bothered by the fact that she was nearly exposed. She shielded Julian, hovering over him like a protective wife. Seeing the look of pure disgust on my face, a flash of guilt crossed her eyes. She scrambled to pull her robe shut, her voice trembling. Mark, we were talking about the baby. It's not what you think. Do you think I'm an idiot? I screamed. Sarah, we're done. I pulled out my phone, intending to record the scene to ruin them both. Sarah lunged to stop me. Get off me, you bitch. I barked, backhanding her. In 7 years, I had never laid a finger on her. Sarah hit the floor, clutching her face, curled up like any other caught adulteress. I recorded a full minute of the wreckage and shoved the phone in my pocket. I told Julian this wasn't over. Suddenly, the door burst open. 4 large men in black suits swarmed in, pinning me to the floor. Mr. Vance, are you all right? We heard the noise from next door. Do you need an ambulance, sir? These were Julian's private security. They'd been in the adjoining room the whole time. They looked terrified. Guarding a billionaire's son while he sleeps with another man's wife is a high-stakes job, and seeing their boss beaten bloody meant their paychecks were in jeopardy. Julian climbed to his feet, wiping blood from his face. He snatched my phone and smashed it against the marble entryway until it was a heap of glass and plastic. Damn it! Julian spat a mouthful of blood and ground his heel into the side of my head. Don't hurt him, Sarah begged, grabbing Julian's arm. Please, we're the ones in the wrong here. Julian spat on the floor. For Sarah's sake, I'm letting this go. Throw him out. The guard dragged me down the hall and tossed me into the elevator. When I got back to the apartment, I started packing. Sarah followed me, and minutes later, her face a mask of tragedy, begging for a second chance. Mark, please listen. I didn't plan for tonight to happen. I invited him there to tell him the surrogacy was a bad idea. You didn't agree to it, and I don't want to lose you. I pushed her away, feeling a toxic mix of nausea and heartbreak. You met him in a hotel room to tell him no? Do I look like a moron to you? He didn't want anyone to see us together, so he booked a suite for privacy. I laughed in her face. And then you just happened to sleep with him? Sarah looked away, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't know what happened. We had some drinks, and I got carried away. I couldn't help myself. She looked up, her eyes wide with a new thought. The drink. There must have been something in the soda. Fine, I said coldly. If you were drugged, let's call the police. Right now, she hesitated. The lie died in her throat. If we call the police, Julian's life is ruined. It already happened, Mark. Can't we just move past it? So, my wife gets used by her ex, and I'm just supposed to wear the horns and say thank you? I was done with her. Sarah, I want a divorce. No, she sobbed, shaking her head. I won't see him again. I'll be better. Just give me a chance to make it up to you. I just lost my way for a second. Her tears were streaming down her face. Her beautiful features twisted in grief. 6 months ago, I would have forgiven her for anything. Now it just felt pathetic. I wasn't going to set myself on fire to keep her warm anymore. I wrenched my hand away. You're tainted, and my heart is dead. Don't touch me. I needed to hit Julian Vance where it hurt. I started digging. The Vance family was old money. His grandfather had built a logistics empire, and his parents had expanded into massive international trade. They were worth at least $100 million. Julian was the quintessential trust fund brat. No wonder he always had women falling over him. But the real shocker was his fiancée, Victoria Sterling. The Sterling Group was the largest commercial real estate developer in the city. You couldn't walk a block downtown without seeing their logo. If Julian married Victoria, he'd essentially inherit half of Chicago. I realized why he wanted a surrogate, even if his fiancée was infertile. He wanted an heir that was his own blood, kept off the books until he secured the Sterling fortune. I smiled. Before I'd gone to the hotel, I'd had the foresight to put a high-end voice recorder in my jacket pocket. It was still there, untouched by the guards. I had the audio of the confrontation, Sarah's pathetic begging, and Julian's admissions. If Sarah tried to fight the divorce, I'd take this to court and ruin her. But a viral scandal wasn't enough to take down a Vance. I needed something bigger. I needed a smoking gun, like Sarah actually getting pregnant with his child. If Victoria Sterling found out Julian was seating a mistress while planning their wedding, she'd destroy him. I moved into a small rental, ignoring Sarah's dozen calls a day. I didn't want to hear her voice. I just wanted the papers signed. If I weren't waiting for the legal process, I would have blocked her weeks ago. One afternoon, Sarah was waiting for me outside my office building. My office was in a boring industrial park on the edge of the city. Sarah used to complain it was too far to visit, so I was always the one picking her up. Today, she was wearing a pale blue ruffle blouse and a white skirt. It was the exact outfit she wore the day she first told me she loved me in college. She was playing the innocent girl card. She walked up to me, looking like a kicked puppy. My coworkers whispered as they passed, mentioning how lucky I was to have such a beautiful, devoted wife. I hadn't told anyone about the affair yet. I still had some pride left. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice like ice. You wouldn't pick up? I didn't know what else to do. Not wanting a scene, I led her to a nearby Starbucks. We sat across from each other, and I laid it out. I can't forgive you. Every time I look at you, I see him. You're being selfish, Sarah. You want to stay married so you can torture me with the memory of what you did. Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked lost. Mark, I do love you, she whispered. I didn't realize how much until you mentioned divorce. I admit, I had a fixation on Julian. It was about the what-ifs and the resentment of how he dumped me. But I never wanted to leave you. You only say that because he'll never marry you. I countered. You're a side piece, Sarah. That's all you'll ever be to a man like him. I leaned in. For 6 months, you stayed up staring at your phone. You took it into the shower because you were terrified I'd see your obsession in the DMs. Was that love for me? It wasn't like that, she said, her face pale. The surrogacy thing. I wanted to hide it because I knew you wouldn't understand. I was torn. Then she dropped the real truth. But he offered me $250,000, Mark. We barely make $5,000 a month combined. How was I supposed to say no to that kind of money? She looked at me with desperate hope. Remember how you wanted that house in the suburbs? I thought this money could be our down payment. And after the baby was born, he said there'd be another $100,000 in expenses. We'd be set. I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. So my wife's body has a price tag? We're selling our marriage for a down payment. My voice turned sharp. Don't pretend this was for us, Sarah. You were losing sleep over his phone calls long before the money was mentioned. Sarah put her head in her hands. Can we please stop talking about him? I told you I regret it. I love you. You said he promised it would be clinical, that he wouldn't touch you. And you believed him. You're either the world's biggest liar or the world's biggest fool. You're tainted, Sarah. I'm done. I stood up and walked out. The sound of her sobbing followed me to the parking lot, but it didn't move me. My heart was a cauterized wound. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Julian Vance. He said he had a surprise for me. I met him at a high-end cigar lounge. Sarah's pregnant, he announced, leaning back with a smug grin. The test confirmed it's mine. Look, Mark, don't be a martyr. Take a check, walk away, and keep your dignity. He told me he'd look after her and that the kid would grow up rich. His arrogance made me realize the hotel wasn't their first time. Sarah had been lying to me since the moment he stepped back into Chicago. Keeping her as a hidden mistress isn't looking after her, Julian, I spat. Julian rolled his eyes. You're so naive. What is love anyway? You gave her a mediocre life on a $5,000 salary. I can give her the world. Her allowance will be more than you'll earn in a decade. I smiled. I could sue you for what happened in that hotel. I could go to the police. Julian threw his hands up. With what evidence? Sarah will never testify against me. Face reality, Mark. In college, you had a chance to compete with me. Now, we aren't even in the same league. Divorce her. I'll make sure you're compensated enough to retire early. He thought he could buy my pride. He thought he could sleep with my wife and pay me off like a disgruntled employee. I felt a cold, dark resolve settle in my chest. I wasn't going to divorce her. Not yet. I was going to make sure he lost everything. The next day, I received a courier. It was a divorce settlement from Sarah. She offered to walk away with nothing, no alimony, no assets as long as I signed immediately. She'd gone from begging for forgiveness to rushing for the exit. Clearly, Julian had gotten in her ear. I tore the papers up and tossed them in the trash. I wasn't an at-fault party. I could drag this out for a year or more. And in that year, she'd give birth to the evidence I needed to bury Julian Vance. I went back to our apartment to tell her I wasn't signing, but she was already gone. She'd moved out every personal item she owned. The home we built was now just a cold, empty box. I got a text from her. Mark, I moved out. You can have the apartment. I'll leave the title in your name after the divorce. I am sorry. If there's a next life, I'll make it up to you. She was moving into Julian's condo. She was choosing to be the kept woman, likely hoping that since Victoria Sterling was infertile, her child would eventually inherit the Vance Sterling empire. I needed her address. I needed proof. But the GPS tracker in her bag had died. I took a leave of absence from work and started tailing Julian. He drove a bright red Porsche, hard to miss. For a week, I followed him, but he never went to a residential condo. He went from his office to high-end clubs, surrounding himself with models and booze. He was living the high life while my wife sat in his gilded cage. One night, while I was watching him from a corner in a lounge, someone tapped my shoulder. It was a man in a crisp suit and glasses. Mr. Miller? Someone would like to speak with you. I was hesitant until he added, You've been following Mr. Vance for a while. It would be a shame if I had to tell him you're here. He led me to a private dining room in a Michelin-starred restaurant. The place was empty, save for one woman eating dinner with terrifying elegance. She was stunning, High cheekbones, sharp eyes, and an aura of absolute power. A dozen security guards stood at a distance, watching the room like hawks. This was Victoria Sterling. She set her fork down and looked at me. "Why are you following my fiancé, Mark?" I stayed quiet. She was his fiancée. For all I knew, she'd defend him. Victoria's eyes flashed with a sudden, sharp cruelty. "If you don't answer, I'll have my associate here explain the consequences." The man in glasses stepped forward and, with a terrifyingly calm motion, smashed a bottle of red wine over my head. The glass shattered. Cold, dark liquid ran down my face, mixing with the sudden, hot sting of blood. The room smelled of iron and tannins. The pain was blinding, but I gritted my teeth. "That's assault," I wheezed. "Victoria Smaid. It's whatever I say it is. I hate Julian Vance. If you're here to help me in this ridiculous engagement, I might just make you a very rich man." I realized then that we were on the same side. I told her everything. Victoria looked at me with a mix of pity and amusement. "Why didn't you just hire a private investigator? Why do the legwork yourself?" "I make $5,000 a month," I said, wiping blood from my eye. "I can't afford a professional." She nodded. "Understood. Your information is valuable. Once I'm done with Julian, I'll make sure you're taken care of." She explained that the engagement was a legacy deal, a debt of honor between their grandfathers. She couldn't break it without a just cause that wouldn't make her family look like the villains. "An illegitimate child?" she mused, her voice dropping into a dark, satisfied tone. "He's trying to secure his bloodline while eyeing my inheritance? He's more ambitious than I thought for a parasite." She had Julian's life mapped out within 24 hours. She found a condo where Sarah was staying. I went there with a megaphone. I stood on the sidewalk of the upscale Gold Coast Street and started screaming. I wanted every neighbor, every passerby, and every social media influencer in the vicinity to hear. "Sarah Miller, you're still my wife. You're living in there with a man who bought you like a used car. 7 years we were together. Is this what our marriage was worth? Being a billionaire's incubator? Where's the professional surrogacy now, Sarah? Tell the neighbors how much he paid for you." People started filming. Nosy neighbors in their Patagonia vests and Lululemon leggings gathered, whispering and pointing. An old woman walking her poodle looked at the building with disgust. "That's shameful. Simply shameful." An older man shook his head. "To sell your soul for a check. She'll regret that when the money runs out." Sarah appeared at the window, her face pale with horror. She looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Then, the red Porsche screeched to a halt. Julian Vance jumped out, looking like he wanted to kill me. "Miller, shut the hell up, or I'll bury you." I laughed into the megaphone. "Here he is, the great Julian Vance, the man who can't win a woman without a checkbook." Julian lunged at me. He was soft, too much champagne and not enough struggle. I'd spent my life working for everything I had. I dodged his wild swing and tackled him into a flower bed. I used the megaphone like a club, thumping him until he was crying for his guards. His security eventually pulled me off, but the damage was done. A crowd of justice-loving Chicagoans, mostly retirees who had nothing better to do, started shouting at the guards to leave me alone. I gave Julian the middle finger and walked away. The video went viral. Victoria Sterling's PR team made sure of it. Headlines hit the tabloids within hours. Vance heir caught in love triangle. Husband claims surrogacy is cover for affair. The Sterling-Vance engagement in jeopardy after viral street brawl. The Gold Coast scandal. Billionaire son accused of buying married woman. The Sterling Group officially canceled the engagement the next morning. It was a domino effect. The Vance family's stock plummeted. Partners who only worked with them to get close to the Sterlings pulled out. The Vance empire began to implode. Audits were triggered, revealing years of creative accounting. Julian's father had a heart attack and ended up in the ICU. Within weeks, Victoria Sterling announced she was acquiring the Vance family's logistics assets for pennies on the dollar. She played him perfectly. To a successful partnership, Victoria said, raising a glass of Cristal in her office. She looked at me and tapped her phone. A notification popped up, direct deposit, $10, 000,000. I stared at the zeros. My life of $5,000 months was over. I was free, but I wasn't finished. I hired my own team of investigators to watch Julian. The reports came back dark. He was broke, desperate, and taking out his rage on Sarah. He'd beaten her so badly she miscarried. Then, he'd kicked her out of the condo he could no longer afford. I rescued her. I brought her back to our old apartment. She had no money, a ruined reputation, and nowhere to go. She was like a broken dog, flinching every time I moved. I took her to the hospital and got a full medical report. 3 broken ribs, a shattered arm, and permanent damage to her uterus. She would never be able to have children. The irony was delicious. "This is the man you chose," I whispered as she lay in hospital bed. "He really looked after you, didn't he?" Sarah sobbed, a sound of pure, hollowed-out regret. I sued Julian for damages and filed criminal charges. His family was so bankrupt they had to sell their last remaining properties just to pay for a lawyer to get him a suspended sentence. He didn't go to jail, but he was a pariah. No one would hire a Vance. I made sure of it. I used my new wealth to plant a friend in his life who offered him a job as a host at a seedy late-night club. Julian, desperate to keep some semblance of his old life, took it. There, he met Dolores. She was a sugar mama I'd hired from out of state. 300 pounds of aggressive appetite and a penchant for teaching younger men. She offered him $3,000 a week to help her with her business. The business was a series of grueling, humiliating nights in the very same hotel room where I'd caught him with Sarah. For 6 months, Julian was her plaything. He was subjected to every humiliation she could dream up. What he didn't know was that every second of it was being streamed to a private, high-stakes corner of the dark web. He became a viral joke among the elite, the Room 91 guy, a fallen prince who would do anything for a buck. The breaking point came when a pet food company sent him a sponsored package of dog treats, referencing a particularly humiliating video involving a leash. Julian realized then that he was a laughingstock. He tried to go back to his parents, but they disowned him. His father couldn't look at him without seeing the Room 91 memes. Destitute and broken, Julian tried to find Sarah. He thought she was still the same weak, foolish girl who would take him back. But Sarah had changed. Living with me was its own kind of hell. I kept her on a $3,000 a month allowance, just enough for groceries and basic needs. I never touched her. "You're too dirty," I told her one night when she tried to crawl into my bed, begging for a scrap of affection. I have a thing about germs. I started coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume from the women I was actually seeing, women who were smarter, kinder, and loyal. I'd bring them home and make Sarah cook us dinner while we laughed in the next room. I was breaking her piece by piece. She funneled all that self-hatred toward the man who had started it all. When Julian finally cornered her in a park to beg for a place to stay, Sarah didn't see her first love. She saw the man who had stolen her future, her body, and her dignity. You ruined me," she shrieked. She pulled a steak knife from her purse, something she'd started carrying out of paranoia. She drove it into Julian's chest. Wait, Julian gasped, looking at the handle sticking out of his sternum. He died in the ambulance. Sarah was arrested for first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 15 years. A month into her sentence, she sent a message through her lawyer. "Mark, I killed him for you. I proved my love. Can you forgive me now?" I didn't even respond. I simply had my lawyer deliver the final divorce papers. I cited her infidelity and her criminal conviction. She walked away with nothing. I walked out of the lawyer's office into the bright Chicago sun. I had $10 million of fresh start and the peace of knowing that in this life, you get exactly what you pay for. Story complete.